purposes of the Commission are to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the city through the preservation and protection of buildings, sites, structures, areas, and districts of historic significance and interest through the preservation and enhancement of local historic, architectural, archaeological, and aesthetic heritage found in the city through the maintenance of the distinctive character of the city's historic districts and through the promotion and enhancement of the city's historic and aesthetic attraction to tourists and visitors. Our procedure for conducting business is the petitioner for each item will be asked to come forward, state your name for the record, and present his or her request. The board will ask any question the board may have. Once public testimony and discussion for a particular item has concluded, the members of the board will deliberate and will render its decision. Members with a personal or financial interest in any request are required to recuse themselves from voting. I would like to take this opportunity to ask the members of the Historic Preservation Commission to introduce themselves, and we'll start from my right and the audience left.
I'm Cindy Keeping.
Dallas Hanbury.
Doug McKentz.
Carol King.
Brian Mann.
James Long.
And I'm Richard Bailey, the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. And I also like to take this opportunity to ask our land use staff members to just wave your hand when I call your name. We'll start with Ms. Christy Anderson to my right, and then Ms. Paula Richardson to my left. Thank you very much. A quorum of the Historic Preservation Commission is 5 members of the 9-member board. It takes 5 votes of the HPC members in attendance to take action on each item, either for approval or denial. Example, 5 members, quorum present. 5 members, majority, votes are needed to pass a motion for approval or denial. A 4-4 tie is a failed motion. With that being said, let me welcome the members of the commission here this afternoon and our guests in the audience. I'd also like to take this opportunity to ask for a vote of approval or denial of the action of the September 11, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
The move and properly second. Is there any unreadiness? Let it be known by a show of hands if you have any unreadiness. All those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Paula, motion approved. Thank you so very much. Upcoming presentation, the October, we have with us this afternoon Ms. Lois Cortell from the City Development Office, and we'd just like to ask her to come to the podium and microphone. And if that microphone is too high, just right, just pull it down just a little bit for you. And you can say whatever you want to say about your background, and then just get into your mission for this afternoon. Thank you for coming, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Lois Cortell. I'm Senior Development Manager with the Development Division with Economic and Community Development. That's our new department. Development Division, we have Land Use Division and Community Development. I'm really happy to be here. I was here back in June, just before the park opened, and sort of just tried to welcome you to our opening, but I didn't really have a good opportunity to explain what it is and why we did it. So I'm happy to run this through and explain a little more about what we did. So I'm going to cover really how we got here. Downtown revitalization was a really important issue. Coming from the development department, we don't just do parks. There's a reason behind why we are involved. We try to act strategically in real estate, in urban design, and in business support. Are sort of our three goals. So we're going to talk about downtown revitalization, materials reuse. One of the most exciting things about this project is the reuse of the materials. So I'm going to talk about that. Public-private investment and strategies, creating a new downtown park. And then I want to sort of look forward, and this is where I'd welcome your input and ideas of next steps. What now? So Mary Ann Neely is a big part of this project, and so it was something that we wanted to sort of put that forward. Without her guidance and input, this project may or may not have happened. It certainly might not have happened in the same way. So you're going to see a lot of themes of her throughout this, and so I wanted to make certain I called that out pretty early on and thank her for her work on the park. She had it had its own special charm. So she always had a nice way of putting things. So we sort of start way back, and this picture's on Christie's back wall. Dexter Avenue in the early 1900s, it was just very, very vibrant. And so I've been working on Lower Dexter Avenue for the 5 years now that I've been with the city of Montgomery. And sort of this is a fascinating photo. You see that the National Historic Register application for Lower Dexter, as some of you may be familiar, calls that Court Square the sort of psychological heart of Montgomery. Mm-hmm. And so this picture evokes that. You can see the Klein building still looks pretty familiar there. Okay. And then by mid-century, the 50s, what strikes me is just how vibrant and alive it was. You look at some of the pictures from the 90s, and there's not a lot of people, especially on the weekends, and cars. And so as you start looking at these pictures, like, wow, it was full of people spending money and buying things. It really was alive. And so it's really, that history is also the 29 Dexter, which is the Montgomery Fair property, 29 Dexter's history. And so Mary Ann had us really back way up to 1868 in Pollock's Dollar Store. So that was, I don't know if you got the brochures, we put a brochure together. Mary Ann explained to us Pollock's was at Dexter and Perry. But that was one of the first dollar stores that started bringing people down at that early time. And they were bought out by the Montgomery Fair. So they were bought out, and then the Montgomery Fair department store announced in 1907. we really we think about this all, the sort of department store era as connected with this park very much. So this is just a quick highlight, and I'll run through some of these in more detail. 1940s is when the annex on Dexter was modernized, bus boycott, voters' rights march, freeway construction, and Montgomery Fair closing downtown. So that sort of starts playing into what happened at this property, and how this property really kind of reflects a lot of what happened in Montgomery as a whole. Fire in '84, so the voting rights march got us sort of refocused on how we can bring this back, and then opened in this year. So that's 150 years. So it sort of bookends why we are so excited about this project. So 29 Dexter, so I'm going to talk about its historic significance, its post-fire sort of structural concerns that happened, and then its example both as sort of an egress issue for the adjacent buildings, and how this sort of access, whether it's through a park or through an alley, really helped, and you see this on the other side of Dexter too, really helped the adjacent buildings be able to egress into that public space. 1907, I referenced that earlier, was when Montgomery Fair opened, and so again, all these pictures, Mary Ann Neely helped us gather them. Huge building, 4 entrances, and this is an image of the Court Street entrance. 1920s, again, another fascinating picture. You can see Klein on the far right, and then the Victorian era of the Montgomery Fair is sort of just the white building about 4 in. And it really was a regional draw. So here by the 40s, they did upgrades to all 3 entrances. We have the Monroe Street entrance, Dexter Avenue entrance, and Court Street. And it's a really odd sort of triangular lot. We have an image of how the parcels are laid up in the upper right there. I want you to, at Dexter Avenue, look at how that Art Deco writing, because that'll be a theme that we picked up on and then tried to replicate in our signage and our later details. It's a really just fascinating, what do you call it, font. We had to look for that font. So by the 50s, the arcade, and it would, different things we read, they'd refer to it either as annex or arcade. And so in this one, the shoppers, we had cosmetics and gloves and leather. Men's alterations, we think was on the upper floor. Okay, keep going. And then constantly, I had people telling me, this is where you got sprayed with perfumes. So you know how like memory is, you have all your different senses. Multiple people would tell me their memory of the Montgomery Fair Annex, or arcade, Montgomery Fair Arcade, was the perfumes and getting sprayed with perfumes. So it's an anecdote, but it's a charming one, so I include that. So by the 60s, this is another picture on the archives. This is from 1967. Montgomery Fair was also known for people from their childhood. So there's memories of Santatown that come. And so you can see the Montgomery Fair, and it's white and blue next to the Ruth and Sons jewelry at 25 Dexter. And we just found this funny because there's people hanging out the windows and the kids are happy. But there's that blue and white facade. So Rosa Parks worked in the Montgomery Fair building. And so she was an assistant to a tailor in men's alterations in 1955. And so we had a couple of different, I think Dr. Bell and Dr. Bailey explained that she was let go or left by 1956. So it wasn't necessarily a very long period. But we have, there's a 2013 book, Jean Theo Harris, The Rebellious Life of Mrs. Rosa Parks, talked about her work here and that she was the secretary during the time when she was working at the Montgomery Fair. And they wrote in this book that she actually would take her lunch breaks and go up and talk to Fred Gray. She would leave the Montgomery Fair, walk up, and that's just another sort of fascinating piece of why this property is so important in the history of Montgomery. The Rosa Parks collection has fairly recently been released by the Library of Congress. Actually, while we were working on it, I don't even know if Marianne had seen this. There are 9 pages where Mrs. Parks, she starts at Dear Friend, she sort of crossed it out, but 9 pages where she documents life working there, and I'm happy to send this out to anyone who's interested. About the segregated bathrooms and life on the bus, and it's on Montgomery Fair stationery, and you can see the 3 entrances, the Court Street, the 29 Dexter, and the Monroe Street, all labeled there. And it's just a fascinating bit of sort of tying this era to the Montgomery Fair. She also had a date book. Again, you can see Montgomery Fair, and this is in the Library of Congress, beautiful color, but she's listing names of women, perhaps from the lawsuit, and then drivers from the boycott. So she's using Montgomery Fair stationery. This was we were just, when we found this on the Library of Congress, we were ecstatic, and we immediately sent it to Dr. Bell. I think she's already gone to the Smithsonian to get it. And we started thinking about how can we use this, like whether in art or the literal stationery in her handwriting. How can we share that information? So fast forward, we had the Montgomery Fair closed, the freeway came in, sort of the tale. Marianne would talk to us about the department store era, that really across the country, when department stores left the center of downtowns, blight happened in that suburban sprawl. So that happened here in Montgomery as well. And we found, I had reached out to Bro Crift at the Advertiser, if we could find anything about the fire in 1984 that took out the main building. And he found 2 articles for this one, and there's a line in there, I don't know if you can see, the building was to have been occupied in December following a $3 million renovation. The Department of Pensions and Security was going to move in. One more, and so this one then followed. They couldn't figure it out, and it's sort of heartbreaking. because it talks about the local preservationists had counted on restoration of this building. It was going to be a catalyst with 430 employees moving in, a whole renovation, and this is another. It's worth taking the time. There's some interesting stuff about the Wallace administration, where they forced into moving there, and the fire provides an easy out for the state not to locate. Much rests with the fate of this old building. So the preservationists say it's important for the survival of downtown. When we started looking at this, we're like, wow, like think about the impact that had, and if we had had that investment, what might have been different. And of course, we have things like that happen now too. We have these catalyst opportunities, some of which happen and some of which don't. And so this is another piece of that Montgomery history. So, but after '84, there was sort of this period of decline, and a lot of buildings boarded up. So we took this. This is a picture from 2014 March, and with the 50th anniversary coming, I'd say by like 2010, 2011, that's when I started hearing more and more talk about, okay, we got to do something. And the city was able to acquire at least 11 properties on Dexter, including this one, using state bonds. And you can see, you can see the Montgomery Fair, and there's only one kind of, if you look at along the top row of that white vitrolite tile, there's one little piece missing, but that upper corner, keep your eye on the upper corner, and then go to the next slide. That spring, the tiles started falling. Multiple tiles fell to the ground and shattered. You can see just how far it spread, and we started actually getting very concerned about safety. Not only the tile, you can kind of see that the beam across the middle was very unstable. We had Terry Grant come in, we had Gordon Davis come in and look at the building and give us recommendations about what we could do. So in that sort of jump-started the planning work. And while doing some research for the Crest building, we found this 1925 photo. Crest is under construction, sort of on the right, and there's the old Fields Millinery at what was 35 Dexter. So you can see the Montgomery Fair. That's its sort of Victorian era facade there, and it's beautiful. So that's from 1925, and we started saying, wow, that's actually really interesting. Maybe we should put something like that back. And so the next picture. So that was one of the ideas that was presented. And there were, we had a meeting, we had gathered some, Chrissy was there, maybe 10 people, 15, not a huge meeting, but we gathered a group. And we looked at that, and there were a couple, oh, that's really pretty. So that's when Mary Ann Neely spoke up. Next one. And Mary Ann said in a very quiet voice, she said, no. She's shaking her, no, we can't put that up. That Art Deco facade that was there when Rosa Parks worked in the building. Those shiny tiles, that glass facade, that is the facade when it was most historically significant. And she was very, very, so this is what we got. She was very, very sure. And it was surprising because we had heard so much about the department store era and the importance of Montgomery Fair as a department store for downtown and bringing people downtown. She was telling us this department store, there were others around, dollar stores, men's and women's clothing. I kept her emails. I don't know if any of you got emails from her. They always came out in like 20-point font to me when I printed them.
Easy to read.
But this department store, as it was interpreted, was a rarity until the Montgomery Fair. So she had told us all about this department store era, but then she said, no, when Rosa Parks worked, that's the era that matters most. And she might have looked out those windows. And it sort of, that was it. We were going to go for that facade. So, but making that happen was actually very difficult. So we had to very carefully, I don't know if you can see the black, those are blobs of sort of asbestos and like hot goop that held the tiles on, so we had to take them off. And we did lose, they had to be very careful because we did lose some of those. The vitrolite's not made, I haven't actually said that the vitrolite Carrera glass, it's a structural pigmented glass that is not made in the US anymore. So it is a really unique material, and these tiles are the 2x3. They're very large, they're very heavy. We were able to get 100 of them down, and you saw some of them were broken. They weren't all perfect, but they carefully pried them off. And then the glass in the center too, those are 12 by 12 Art Deco glass block.
Wow.
And that we saved 70%. So we began planning for adaptive reuse, for a reconstruction of the facade. And this is a little spreadsheet. I show this because I really took it very seriously. This is my Excel spreadsheet. We really we labeled every single tile, so we knew which ones were coming down, which ones could go back where, which ones weren't there. That was which ones were broken, how much we expected to come down, because we had to store them. I mean, there wasn't any sort of good place to put them. We ended up walking them down one by one, and they were in the basement of 1 Court Square for until they went back up, so about 3 years. So carefully deconstructed from the back. This is just a picture from the crest roof looking down as they took the roof off and then sort of worked their way up. And then there's an image. And so here's the workers. And so because it was such detail work trying to get the tiles off, and it was really important that they not break them because it was such a rare material. I was there on site a lot and talked with them, brought them donuts, brought them, and I actually sat and explained, Rosa Parks worked in this building. And it was really just interesting because to explain, and maybe they were, I don't know if they were humoring me, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but it just felt like their saving rate got better and better.
Right.
And they were the one applying, they had my spreadsheet, they were the one putting the little piece of tape with the row and the column on each piece. So it was important to explain that they were part of something that we were trying to do. All right, so we need this is when it was come down. We started, this issue of the missing teeth on a downtown streetscape is very important. And you can, again, see that on the other side where we lost a building, where the alley is. It's just, it's a real break in the fabric of the block. We had a lot of challenges. Floor heights were very different across from one side to the other. The historic walls are not straight. They're not straight at all. There's a lot of irregularity there. And we had this other challenge, not only drainage, you can see it's full of, regularly after rain events it would get full of water, but this is something that Terry Grant made certain that we were really aware of, is not putting lateral pressure on adjacent buildings, existing buildings. If you've been in 25 Dexter, they actually have a stair-step brick in their basement. So he really wanted us to be careful. We could not just pour it in. So we had to be, that was a factor that we had to think about in the design. Other constraints, the changes in fire codes we had, so you can see our property is there, but Cress and 25, Cress enter into this public way. And that's another reason we couldn't just put a whole building back. Those buildings needed this egress in order to develop the upper floors, because they needed to be, I think it's 75 feet back. ADA, we had a number of issues. If you go to the park, you can see there's some sloping. That is so that the ADA can land carefully. So Pocket Park, these are our goals. Recreating it. It's a freestanding gateway and a floating deck. The floating deck ended up being the solution to avoiding the lateral pressures. People have asked, why a deck? Well, it's because of that lateral pressure issue, and it ends up softening it too, really. So it's not this sort of urban, hard. It's soft and peaceful as you come back. New, unique downtown green space and the opportunity to learn about history. Just a quick, just a shout out, Chambliss King did our design. We bid it out. Liberty Construction was our construction worker. Terry Grant, engineer. Pep Pilgrim was our surveyor. and city staff did the project management. A couple of the design innovations that we're really proud of, the piers go 20 feet deep. It's really, so freestanding facade, it does not touch the adjacent buildings. That was another aspect that was really important to 25 and what was 35 on the other side, that they didn't want to be tied in. Now, remember the old Montgomery Fair had collapsed during this time period, and they were very sensitive about not tying into each other. So this is a freestanding facade, and in order to do that, we had to go that deep. We also didn't fill in those four glasses. There's no glass there so that it can withstand wind. And I double checked just today with Hurricane Michael coming in. It can survive a Category 2, 115 mile per hour winds is what it's specified at. So that was just another challenge that we had. LED lighting shining up both on the facade and and all around the beds. And then, so here's a little bit just to how it works. If you haven't gone all the way back, it's really important. The facade is wonderful, but this is a deep lot. And how it feels, you can actually view where the old Montgomery Fair was from the back of the lot. And how it feels, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter as you leave Dexter and go all the way back. And that's where all the planting is. You can see it doesn't touch, the deck actually in many places doesn't touch the adjacent walls either. Even when it goes all the way up, there's a couple inches. And some of that's because of the irregular walls. There wasn't a good place to attach to.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, can you go back to that slide? Just back one. Okay, it says the existing walls will serve as gallery space.
Yes.
Yeah, is that where the Montgomery Fair condos, or, the apartments and things are?
Oh,
That structure right there?
yeah, so that's, I think
The
that's
back
just
of 'em?
intending to point to the back. Yeah, the
Yeah, the
Montgomery Fair
walls,
condos.
but that
yeah.
that structure is
The back of the wall,
apartments.
though,
Okay.
is Montgomery Fair condos.
Okay,
And
so go up a little bit where it says stair circulation down from levels.
Yes, so that ended up not happening. That was one of the initial plans. They ended up putting the stairs in what was 35.
But what's right there to the far left? What does that back up to?
That's the Crest building. So that opens into Crest.
Okay.
And then
just-
behind, going further to the left, that's, it was Adams
Adams Hudson, that's a
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
Okay, but it's not all the way through Adams. There's another wall or structure right there.
Yeah, there's another wall.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many different owners. We were constantly
Yeah.
dealing with that. So the gallery space is one of those sort of next steps. We would love to be able to bring in more art, whether it's that letter, maybe even actually have that letter out as art, or murals. We actually have quite a bit of the old blue and white vitrolite tile broken. I have buckets of the broken blue and white tile, so maybe a mosaic of some sort. And then there's a fence. So there's a lot of opportunity for art, and a utility panel. And that's something we just set aside. We needed to get it built and up, but we would like to bring more of that in. Okay. And this so you can see here where the adjacent, part of why we couldn't just build it right away, both Gerald Leibowitz and the folks at Crest used that area for their construction access. And that was another really important contribution of us. We had legal access agreements with both of them. They needed, especially some of these cranes that they had to get back in there, they needed that access in order to get into that tight space. So here's an example. You can see the balconies going in, but both of them drove in and used the park for construction access. Okay, we'll keep going. That's just an example. Midway, we put a screen up. So so it wouldn't be empty. So here's some of the upper story balconies going in. This is an example. Now, this wasn't us. These are the adjacent folks using that park for access to get lifts, and the amount of steel that they both had to bring in for the balconies and then for the roof structures. They really needed our access in order to get in there. And this is our crew. So this is Liberty, and I like this. Again, I was out there a lot, getting to know the crew and explaining what it was. But this, you can see the piers. So those things that are wrapped, those are the piers that went down so that it could float. And you can see how much distance there is underneath. There are 2 access panels. So parks, you can pull it up and you can actually access it. But that drainage is another. So that's gravel there. In one of the early shots, I didn't pause as much as I should have, but drainage was another real big challenge where this would get wet. So we, and fill up, and then Gerald's basement would get full. Was it us? I don't know. But so one of the things that was very important was that they dug down and we actually put in a roof membrane. It's like one of those thick things that they put on roofs. They're white. So they dug it. It's like a V shape, the roof membrane. Then there's a pipe. So both Crest and 25 drain into the park. And then we put a pipe, and then we put the rock. So it is draining away from both buildings. And as far as I know, Gerald's basement has been bone dry since. So it's working. It's getting it away from the adjacent buildings. So there, as you can see, the planters going in as well. And then the Art Deco glass, the Faulkner tile, did the tile. 80 of the 114 glass were our original. There are some new, and they did a great job. They blended in the new. You can tell, the stripe, the variations, just a little bit different, but they really did a good job. The 80, they had to put them in muriatic acid 3 different times to get them clean. They were very dirty, and some of them popped open. And so the gas is gone. So we probably over time we'll see the old ones, getting moist. We'll see. This will be its first winter. We'll see how they survive. But again, local tile and folks. And then this is another brief that was part of our bid. The NPS on the structural pigmented glass was very useful for all the contractors. Again, and if you're interested, this would be a preservation brief that I would recommend, how to take care of this glass, where it is. It's a fascinating material. And so the guy that put it up, there's really, and this was Alabama Historic Commission helped us, recommended that Tim Dunn, fascinating guy who works in this. He did a theater, I'm blanking on the name, also in Alabama. So he came down from St. Louis, and he's training an apprentice and in how to reuse this historic material. And he was out there. He has a big cigar in his mouth. He's just quite a character. But Tim Dunn, the vitrolite specialist, came and one by one put them up. The bench design is also very unique. It's it's Garapa hardwood, and so what the designers were trying to do, you can see in this picture, they were trying to make it like the bench was pulled up. And then there's a planter, but they were inspired by the High Line, and so just hats off. We were trying to make something really unique and special. The High Line inspired a lot of the native plantings, and that's the next thing. Next slide. Grasses and petunias and black-eyed Susans, and we've already, as people have sent pictures of hummingbirds and butterflies coming back. So it's unique. It's not a lot of green space, and I think folks' concept of what is a park, it's not a classic park. It is an urban park, but it is very peaceful especially as you go towards the back, and quiet. So native perennials. So there is a picture of it done, and then from the rear is also actually a really interesting view, and the lighting, you can see our LED posts. It's very bright. Opening was June 21st. The picture of Dr. Bailey there overseeing. We uncovered, it's sort of a last touch in a way, but we had a quote from Mrs. Parks about being known as a person concerned about freedom, equality, justice, and prosperity. And so that is carved into limestone as you walk into the concrete apron there, and just sort of signals to you as you leave Dexter that this place is something special. So we made a big deal of uncovering that at the opening ceremony. Adjacent redevelopment, the Ruth building is now completed, as is the Crest building. And as I said, that they wouldn't have happened without this. They needed the egress in order to happen. So this is a park that's special on many levels. Between the two of them, there's now 36 new market rate units. Retail space, about 5,000 or 6,000 in the Ruth building, and we're getting different quotes of 20,000 or so retail space on Crest. Each 525 and about $19 million in declared building permit value. That doesn't count acquisition or soft costs. So assessed value, again, because I'm in the Department of Development, I care about this type of thing. 2015, 25 Dexter was worth 101. 2018, it's now at 679. In 39, Dexter 105, and you can see their value, the current value, 2.7 now. So that doesn't quite align with the 19 million. I don't know if the county knows how much they've invested in it. Just a flyer. It's just you can see there's a really interesting chandelier that's happened adjacent, and they're talking up how they open up into the city park, and it's so the broker sent this to me, and it's a real selling point for them. Here, it's a real example of public and private spaces, and this is actually from up in 25 from one of the balconies, and you can get a sense for how the sort of public and private park and private spaces are interacting from above. And even at night, it's gorgeous. So those posts are LED lighting, and it sort of comes on and off. And it's a beautiful view from the back and really opens up all the way to Dexter. And you can see how the plantings, now they'll grow up and they'll get bigger over time, but they are sort of reset. And so elements of Montgomery Fair that we've included so that you notice that the blue, in that original picture, there wasn't enough blue. And that deep blue is very rare. And so when we talked to Tim, he didn't even have enough. So we weren't able to do the whole bottom in blue. We were able to do the edge around the top, but we had elements like, so that 29, you remember the Art Deco font. So we have an urban designer. She worked with our local artist. To the next one. So both the address panel and the city's logo are from original blue tiles, and I have a couple more tiles that they sandblasted and hand painted. So just two really special touches to bring back that bright blue. And then the information panel is at the bottom, ADA height. And I think the next one. So that's a picture of the panel. And we have that, and I call it up because we started with Marianne. She, Dr. Bailey helped us with this language, and Dr. Bell helped us with this language. But a lot of Marianne's review early on influenced this, and so we're pretty proud of this panel. And when she got sick and went to the hospital, she couldn't make the opening. We're like, you have to come. I was still talking with Collier. Well, so we were able to we printed this out, and Mac and I went to see her just within the last month before she passed, and we brought this in a piece of paper. We're like, hey, look, and she was so happy. And she's like, but there's nowhere to keep it. And I said, well, we'll get it framed. We'll come back, we'll get it framed. So anyway, we have the framed version that was for Marianne is now up in our office, but it was intended as a gift. And so that's a really special panel, but we also, it's fast and it's short, but hopefully it explains not only the Rosa Parks era, but the department store era, and what this means for Montgomery. Coming back to life, so it's sort of this mix of architectural styles that really don't necessarily work together, but it's kind of this reflection of the broad range of history that happened on that block. And so that's something that, as you look at that crazy white and blue tile facade, it's sort of that it reflects that block's kind of crazy different eras and importance. So it's coming back to life. And here's just a picture of the cruise in. If you haven't made the cruise in, packed with people, all the events that are now happening. It's very exciting, all ages, a very diverse group of folks coming out, seeing cars and kids, and it was just exciting to maybe we can be getting this block back to life. So that's next steps. That's my ending. We're thinking about programming. We're thinking about talks. Sort of now that it's open, how do we get more people there? We've put out benches. Maybe we need to do something in the park, bring more art in. So we're open for ideas.
Well, I mean, I know that you've done, let me speak into the mic, I'm sorry. I know that it's planted already, but going forward, it might be interesting to maybe partner with Eat South in terms of continuing to focus on what's planted there. You know, they do a lot downtown already. Be an interesting way to do, and maybe I hate to say this because I work in government too, quote unquote easy partnership. But you know, they're already downtown as it is.
For the plantings?
Yeah, and just, you know, because, you know, they do a lot of community events that are well attended. It seems like a topic that brings a wide cross section of our community together.
Right.
People love it. You know.
That's a great idea. I'm writing it down. We both Jocelyn and myself have personally weeded a couple of times. You know, so it's a unique park, and so we're working on maintenance. We had reached out to the botanical gardens, and you know, so maybe finding a gardeners group to adopt the sort of special plantings is another aspect. We cannot close. One of the difficulties with sort of a big event like with Eat South is that we cannot close the park. So, you know, because they're residents, they required egress. We can never
no, this
close
is
it.
a wide open community. Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, it's
community
always
event.
gotta
Yeah,
be
yeah,
open.
absolutely.
Like even like events, like there couldn't be like a wedding there. We have to keep it open as a public space. So no, that's a great idea. I'll reach out to them.
I don't know, it's kind of half baked, but you know, there might be something there.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you know whether Montgomery Fair was a family-owned department store or corporate?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Well, would you be interested in a picture that I took there when I was 4 years old with
Yes.
the Easter Bunny?
Yes, very much. I'll put it in the next.
I
I'll
said that
update it.
before. They still laugh about it.
And I mean, there were so many family that worked there. I think, Dr. Bailey, you had a relative who worked there too, right?
And I know some others.
Well, the picture's in good shape. It's actually in color.
Please send, I'll give you my card. Or
Okay.
send it to Christy and she'll forward it.
Okay,
I'd
I will.
like that.
It's just sitting there, so it won't. It'll be there for posterity. So
I would like that.
I'll donate it.
And that's, as I talk to people, that they keep saying, I never thought I'd see Lower Dexter come back in my lifetime. You know, so it's just, this is sort of an example, Montgomery Fair, that people have these memories of growing up, and it's just nice that we didn't completely lose it. We were able
Well,
to
and it
save
also shows that the idea of downtown, even in this day and age, holds a powerful, it has a powerful grip of people's imaginations, which I imagine suggests that continued investment in downtown would be
Yes.
worthwhile.
Yes, absolutely. The sort of that psychological heart and the importance of sort of like your community heart.
A hub,
you know,
yeah.
the role of downtown. Yeah, it's exactly. It's a nice. So we have framed that sort of role of downtown, importance of Dexter as sort of like not a Main Street, you know, but yeah, as type of historic Main Street, not officially designated. Looking at Christy, but we have talked about that, and we submitted for an award for urban design, and we will be picking that award up in Mississippi the end of the week. The Alabama State chapter American Planning Association, we're getting the Franklin Setzer Award for the block. So we're pretty excited about that this week. And then we've submitted the park itself for the National Urban Design Award. And we think there's sort of there's a downtown association, International Downtown Association, and others that we can talk about sort of what we've done here for not only for reconstructing a facade and saving materials, but as a way to stimulate the adjacent historic buildings because of the egress issue. That happens in a lot of sort of these dense urban areas. And so we're hopeful we have a model here that we can share with others.
Very
Any other
interesting.
questions, comments?
My comment is wonderful presentation. Appreciate it very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
And I didn't know a lot of this. I remember, of course, Montgomery Fair from as a kid shopping there, and the work that was done, just outstanding. It's
Thank you.
unbelievable.
Thank you.
It really goes to show, if you're really interested in preservation, you walk the extra mile, and you guys did that. And I just want to say how much we all appreciate the end result. Beautiful.
Thank you. And it's interesting as sort of city staffer, there were many opportunities early on when the project could have died, you know, or maybe somebody would have broken all the tile. You know, like there's so many places where it could have gone wrong.
Murphy.
It really does take constant sort of vigilance and pushing year after year and getting it funded and all that. It's very rewarding. And when we reached out to Dr. Bell at the Rosa Parks Museum, she was also fascinated with this aspect of Mrs. Parks, because she said people come to their museum, they learn all about the bus boycott, but then they leave wanting to know more about Mrs. Parks as a person, you know, and they don't. And so she's excited to have all our brochures. We've put some brochures together to have at the museum to send people back and forth and learn more about this complicated, smart woman and her life and impact on the world. So.
You know, I say all the
Thank you.
time that the city has, this city in particular, because that's where I live, has probably, excuse me, some of the best talent, you know, in terms of urban planning. And I think if we just take our politics aside and let you people go to work, I think we could get a heck of a lot accomplished in record time, actually, because politics not involved. And I just don't think most people in this city realize that. I think you people are extremely talented. I know Chrissy is, and Paula, they on top of their game. I mean, really, I mean that. And I had the greatest respect for their intelligence and their ability to get things done for this city. They just have their hands tied, simply because, you know, we get involved in politics. But I do appreciate that they are highly capable, and they have a highly capable staff and some extremely talented people. And I just wish they would just put the politics aside and let these people go and do some of the things that this city requires and should have done. It should have been done, actually, but at least get started. And I think that city planning would be the place to start. And I certainly appreciate your presentation. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for those.
Anyone
comments.
else? Question, comments?
Thank you. Enjoyed the presentation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
Well,
you.
Mr. McCann's made a good segue into what I passed out to you, since we'll be talking about education. I have given you an overview of the 4 practices from the Secretary of Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties, which is a 239-page document. If you want to look at it, it's online, it's illustrated, because this falls into one of those categories. We talk about preservation, which is essentially the maintenance of a building, no restoration, no touching up paint, just doing basic maintenance, weatherproofing of a building. Essentially a mothball. Drayton Hall outside of Charleston is probably the best example I can think of in the U.S. If you've gone to Europe and gone to any old abbey ruins in England, those are all preservation. You know, if a stone falls off, they're going to make sure there's nothing else loose that's going to keep falling, but they're not doing any restoration work. The second is restoration, and that's I would say Old Alabama Town is probably the best example of looking at stripping away later additions and alterations to a structure and restoring the building to its original appearance. Most of what we talk about is rehabilitation, which is finding adaptive uses for older structures, or making modern modifications to older structures, but doing it in a sympathetic manner. I do not want an old-timey kitchen in my house. My house was built in 1912. I have a very modern kitchen in my house, but it plays nice with the beadboard ceiling and walls full of windows. So rehabilitation is mostly what we talk about. The last category is reconstruction. It's usually the means of last resort in the preservation world of rebuilding something that has been lost. Colonial Williamsburg is probably the most famous example of that, and they keep finding that they might have gotten some of those things wrong. But in this case, we knew what it looked like because the building came down, a very short time period elapsed between the deconstruction and the reconstruction in this case. So this was my teachable moment. Secretary of Interior standards are the guiding principles of work in preservation, and most of the time when you hear people talk about it, it references its rehabilitation is what they're talking about, but there are those three other categories, and reconstruction is one of those. So, you learned all sorts of stuff tonight you didn't know you were going to learn.
Thank you.
Let me just add one or 2 points. First of all, I echo everything that the other members have said regarding the quality of presentation. Excellent, outstanding. I have one question for you. When you all engage in your work, do you ask the crewmaster or the person in charge of whatever it is you're doing, that if that person were to find an old photograph or document, to give it to someone instead of putting it in the trash? Do you ever do that?
I would. But give me an example. You mean in this project, or
Any project?
well, I collect them. I guess I'm not totally understanding your question.
In other words, if a person, for example, on Dexter Avenue were to run into an old photograph, have you all
Do they know where to-
instructed the manager of that project to tell his people
not
not to just
explicitly.
put it in the trash?
No, not explicitly. That's a good point. We should do that.
Those are called treasures.
Yes, they are. Well, we have all sorts of, memorabilia and signs and things, and
Okay.
but not photos.
Yeah, I just run into people occasionally who would tell me that he or she saw something and somebody just threw it away, not even taking the opportunity to pass it on to someone who might be able to evaluate it and determine whether it has any kind of historical significance.
That would be a shame.
That's my point.
Yeah, that would be a shame.
Yeah, it is, but it happens every day, and that's what we're here for. That's what you're for. And if a person were to find a receipt, for example, that Rosa Parks may have purchased a television, that'd be worth a lot of money,
Yes,
if you know what I'm saying.
yes.
So that was the reason for my question.
Or tickets from alterations and
Sure.
things like that.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And the other point I want to make, when you mentioned that Rosa Parks visited Fred Gray's office many times during the lunch,
Yes.
one thing Ms. Harris did not mention in her book is that she only walked 1 block from her Montgomery Fair office building to Fred Gray's office, just 1 block.
It was just
so
1
it
block.
wasn't like she was
It wasn't
walking
actually
a
all
major distance to go from Montgomery Fair to Fred Gray's office, just 1 block.
It was lunchtime.
And at lunch,
Yes.
yeah, it's a good walk. I do that.
Yes. Hmm. Right. So she did that quite frequently. And the thing about it, when you put all of it in focus, the day of the trial, Rosa Parks had to only walk 1 block to Fred Gray's office, and they walk a half a block to City Court. It's amazing. We're talking about everything basically being within view of where we are right now. Basically, all of these places we're talking about right now, we would walk outside of that door, those places, at least to that corner, those places will be within view. That's amazing.
It's a really rich few blocks. So it's sad what we've lost.
So,
Which includes Fred Gray's office building, because you all recommended to get it off our local designation rolls because the state tore it down in the 90s.
Fred Gray's office building?
Yes.
Yeah, that was yeah, it was torn down.
It's gone.
Right, you're talking about the one on Dexter
Dexter.
Avenue.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the one on Monroe Street.
That
Oh,
was the
okay.
first office.
Right.
That one's probably gone too.
Yeah, that predated.
But the one up the street got torn down.
Right, yeah.
Dexter.
No, we're not talking
Well,
about
The
that.
marker's on Dexter.
Both of them got torn down.
Right, we're not talking about that one. Yeah, okay.
So RSA probably tore that one down then, right?
Yeah, I guess.
We
Long
do
time
still,
ago.
we do still have challenges.
We do.
on Dexter, we do.
We do.
But that's
And-
why when
and,
we finished one and we have a victory,
That's right.
we're celebrating
Okay.
that
Well,
one.
anyway, Ms. Cortez, it's been a pleasure to have you here this afternoon. We'd just like you to come back sometime to update us, or just come back and sit in the audience. The choice is yours.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
As we continue, we would like to ask our working committee members, Cindy Keeping, Carol King, and Brian Mann, to give us an update on revamping the historic sign program.
Okay, this is the existing signs that we have for historic markers.
Okay.
And in talking to Carol, she's talked to several leaders and people around Montgomery area, and apparently people like this. This is historic in itself, right, Carol?
That's what they're saying. They've been using it, the neighborhoods have been using it for 50 years at this point, and are not necessarily ready to let it go altogether. The material, the design, everything. So I think,
And the cost, yes.
and the cost, right, the cost. So, Christy, how many properties are in districts? Just off, you know.
When we send out postcards to
Right.
addresses, it is just under 2,000.
Okay, so there's
So
just
with the
under.
individuals, they're probably, I can't remember if that was before or after we took
Okay.
Powder Magazine out.
So it's basically a potential market of 2,000-ish?
Yes.
Right, okay. So this is a metal with a screen on it, so we have, I'm passing out to the members here, we have the existing historic sign guidelines about how people, the process now that they apply to Christie through an application. And
I got one today, by the way.
Oh,
So they're
gosh.
still trickling in, and I just have to call them and tell them, sorry, I got nothing for you, so.
Well, we'll try to move. So we were looking at, and we've given this to the board members to look over the to-be-considered guidelines, too. The purpose of the Historic Sign Program is to promote the existing designated resources, properties, and then to create awareness of the potential properties that are out there for historic designation, for the process, and then for protection. Because there's lots of neighborhoods in Montgomery that are now over 50 years old and are still very much intact that are potential historic designation, historic districts as well. So if each member will look over this and maybe get back with us with some comments about how we should move forward with the criteria. One of the things that we look at right now is that anyone can apply for this sign if they are locally designated, or they're in a locally designated district, or any property that is listed itself in the National Register of Historic Places, or any contributing structure that's in a National Register district, or this is something that was not on the other criteria, which is any property listed in the Alabama Register, which does exist through the Alabama Historical Commission, or any property listed in a district that's in the Alabama, which I don't think we have any. We have Alabama registered properties, but we don't have any districts here in Montgomery.
The Alabama Register is not really geared towards districts.
It's really more individual.
It's really more individual properties.
Right. But that's also, I don't say a market, but that's also something we haven't really specifically, detailed in the criteria too. So that's a potential market as well. And then there are lots of other criteria that go there about, evaluating the structure itself, but that also goes with the designation process. When the survey work is done on the individual properties for designation, or whether they're, done in the district, with the district thing as well. And that would hopefully ramp the game up on survey work too. Because a lot of the application process that goes with this, the existing application process is really, it's really asking for some great questions, documenting properties, in the individual properties when people do ask to be considered, to be able to have one of these signs. So I think that actually adds even more information to the documenting process over and above what may have been done survey-wise originally, because it's been an awful...
The surveys are old.
Right.
And to date, this body has not required that someone do any research on their property. I mean, we ask the questions, what can you tell us about the history of the house? What can you tell us about alterations that have been made to the property? And a lot of times we have people who come in who have just purchased the property and they want a sign. So I think one of the questions to consider is, does that make it an incomplete application if we want to gather more information about these properties? Do they need to do a little bit of research to come forward?
I think this is a way to ramp up the documentation on structures. And there's so many things out there now available to John Q. genealogist or someone who's not a professional historian, abstract city directories, Sanborn maps, historic photographs. There's just so much out there that people can document their houses, whereas, 40, 50 years ago, it really wasn't that accessible. So I think that is something that we should also do, is ask for more.
Do we have, I'm just thinking of myself, I moved into a historic district. I didn't know how to do all this stuff. Do we have a kind of a how-to?
Well, that's up to us.
I think we need to.
So
Well,
this is...
I will say, I think it's still on the Alabama Historical Commission's website that when I was National Register and Dorothy Walker was State Register, we did a How to Research Your House guide, and I think that's still available.
And that may be leading into something that will be a component of the preservation leadership class.
Yeah, I made a note while we were sitting here about talking about historic resources.
Right, so that's kind of another reason we need to get this in place by the spring. So that we can then prepare people with the tools they need to come back to us. So we've been looking into vendors who can actually produce something in the neighborhood of the same design for us, with a little bit. And Cindy, you want to show the somewhat of a design that we need to work on the wording.
Yeah,
But I do like that.
I do too.
Where did that come from?
Adina Kramer in our office worked on that.
Is that the front of this building?
Yes.
With a little
It reminds me of the Parthenon.
So does the front of this building.
It does.
We're supposed to.
But I like the fact that it's got Montgomery Historic Preservation Commission on it versus Historic Building Montgomery.
Yeah.
The reason we're here, we started this process, is because the owner of the business that made these signs told us he could no longer provide them. Isn't that what began this?
We started this conversation several years ago about rebranding and
But the signs are no
marketing.
longer available
Those
from
aren't.
the supplier.
But when I went to Charlie's Trophies a couple of years ago, they can produce a similar aluminum sign. It's just a slightly smaller size was what their maximum capacity was. But yeah, when we no longer had a supply of that, it seemed like a good time to break away. And Landmarks has gone golden anniversary with the triangle and the fountain, and put some gold laurels around the top of it. And I think it's time for us to do our own thing.
So we
I
can
feel
look-
like we haven't been making much progress. We haven't met in a while, and I think we need to meet again. And I think we should probably have Christy meet with us.
Okay.
And I know there are several historic districts with very active groups,
Right.
neighborhood groups.
Right.
I have no problem going to those groups.
Well, I think we'll need to develop a marketing campaign too, because this is, something, a train that's been going 50 years with this particular thing. But in my discussion with some of the neighborhood leaders, what do you think about doing this? Their thought is they're good with changing a little bit, but going to a totally different design. Like they say, our sign is historic. It's 50 years old. This is the sign that's been used.
Half of them in my neighborhood cannot be read anymore.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they
Definitely.
fade. They
Yeah.
don't last.
Well, and there are better
Materials.
ways to do that, UV, UVA coating and stuff like that. And I also think it's really important that we look at the cost on them too. These we walked away from at about, they were right, $45, $50 last go round, and I'm not sure that we
And that
could
was our cost. I mean, we're
Right.
not making anything on these.
Is there a reason that you can't have more than one method of designating a property? If some people want the 10 aluminum sign, and if some want to do like the major metropolitan areas,
Well, you can do that now if you want to. You would just need to bring the design and the word before us anyway.
I would just be thankful if y'all could pick one sign
Just pick one
to
sign.
start with.
well, it seems
Well,
like
it's also,
I mean, and I think if you get the look, I mean,
Right.
that emblem could be used as a cast seal.
yeah, you actually
Too,
could
that,
turn
I mean, I think getting the image and the identity is really the first piece of figuring out what the heck you can do with in terms of producing signs. And maybe it's, you have the less expensive kind of plaque that we've had, but maybe there's also a cast option if you want to spring for it.
And the logistics of something that's more expensive, in talking with some national vendors or really big historic sign people, how is the financial of this going to work? Is the city of Montgomery going to buy 500 and stick, and then we'll storm in a back room and sell them? So the logistics of this is a little tricky, but it has worked on a form like that that's, for better use of words, fairly common and would be a stock size that a sign person would have, and then it would just be initial art costs for the screen that would then be produced when Christie had X number, something to that effect. The production of them, when you get to something with the cast, figuring that out and talking to people, I mean, the city's not ready to make a commitment. Outside vendor is not ready to, make up 100 of these with our design on it and then sell them occasionally, that kind of thing. So the logistics of how we've sort of gotten into this easy way to do this, which has worked for a while. So if we can kind of get at least somewhere close to that, I think that our purpose of the sign thing, which is to draw attention to, to show the designated properties and then to draw awareness to the fact that there's a lot more out there too. So it's almost more about the methodology than it is about the, the actual piece or the actual sign itself. So,
I agree. Well,
so, yeah, if everybody would look over these guidelines, and then you've got our email, so if you want to make some changes or something to that effect, give us send it back to us. And then, Brian, if you want to meet, just come up with a date and time, and
I'll be there.
we'll sit down and do some more fine tuning.
Any
I
other
like the,
question that anyone has? Yes.
I like the movement that this project is making. I mean, this is gonna open up a few more avenues, and I think that that's the right direction to go to. What was the thinking behind the light in the middle of the sign?
There's one out there.
I understand.
It's detail.
It's just a detail.
So then,
But I mean, there's a lot to work out as to, what else will be put on here. One of the pieces, of what type of information should be considered for the historic sign display? What would we put on here? We like the Montgomery Historic Preservation Commission.
Yes.
That brands this
Organization.
commission, it brands the city of Montgomery too. And then, whether it's a data construction, if you want to do some of these also could be used, or we could come up with a way that these could be used as entry signs to the historic neighborhoods as well, which a lot of the historic neighborhoods have gotten away from using that particular look.
Yes, because they
just-
rotted out.
Yeah, because it's really, they don't
Unless somebody paints it.
withstand the weather as much. And then whether a particular structure is itself individually of note with like a person, relationship with a person, or a notable event as well too. So, but I also like the idea, like Christy said, by doing this and requiring a little more information on their application, we'll be able to, create
Validate.
a larger database or create more information about Montgomery's historic houses.
So Carol, then obviously we have a working committee on this, but for the rest of us, our contribution then needs to be commenting and getting our comments back to you on the historic sign guideline. Historic sign guidelines.
New eyes.
No, but I'm saying I don't want us, I think that we all need to, contribute to this so we can be ready for the spring. So is that
Yeah.
the contribution you would like from us then?
Right.
Okay.
Comments on this.
Okay, good.
If you see something we've missed, and we'll look at the application process too. And I like the one that we proposed. We didn't share it with you, but because we needed to retype it some more. But and really ask for more information. Not just expect them to bring it to us, but actually ask and require a little more information, or at least a little more effort into looking into it. So,
Great, okay, cool.
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much. And do you think we'll be able to wrap this up at our November meeting?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So we'll make this a work in progress. Okay. Very
Report
good.
back.
Yes. Thank you so much. Preservation Leadership class, need a working committee if we want to do this. Christy, can you say a few words about the Preservation Leadership class?
A piece of paper is being passed down that has, you all have seen this before. It was a recap of how Mobile had structured their class. If we want to do this, we would need to start in no later than the last week of March to try to have a graduation coincide with the awards program, which would be May 14th.
How would we make this available to everybody? Or are we limited on, we're not just opening our doors to Montgomery and saying,
Well, we've got to come up with a class before we offer it to anybody. I mean, we can, send it out. I don't know, we may have money for a mailing, send it through the realtors, send it through,
Well, we have an email network. We have that Historic
Yeah.
Neighborhood Coalition network.
send it to some of I've been working with some of the magnet high schools. They may have students who might be interested that if we've got students, maybe we waive the fee if they're in school and have a teacher sponsor them, or, letter of recommendation that we're not going to end up with people just goofing off. So that's kind of logistical stuff that I think will be easier to sort out than then the commitment of, is this something we want to do? Is this something y'all are going to be willing to participate in or attend? We're still struggling a little bit with a good venue.
I did not hear back about the
Crest,
community room.
okay.
Right. We were looking at the community room at Crest, which is
Right up our alley.
a good idea.
Dallas made inquiries at the library, and based on what he found out, we do not think that's the place to do it.
They just have some
Rules.
rules. Yeah. So okay, so if somebody just walks in who's there to get a book or a movie or something, and they want to come into the class, they're in the class for free. I'm sorry, let me finish. And then the other thing is also that we can't do alcohol. Or hey, preservation gets tough. Outside food. Hours, they get a little restricted on Thursday and Friday.
And we
they
can't
close
charge a
early.
fee.
Can't charge a fee.
When do you want to do this? What time of day?
Probably 5:30 to 7
On
a Monday or a Wednesday. Because I have meetings on Tuesdays, and I have a commitment on Thursdays through June. So I won't be here on Thursdays if y'all want to do it on Thursdays.
Have you,
Other city meetings meet Tuesday and
Yeah.
Thursdays, so.
So,
what, I mean, huh?
how many hours is it?
How many hours?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, would it be just,
1.5 times 7?
Yeah,
8?
7, 6.
so we're gonna need Monday and Wednesdays,
Or
No.
Monday or once a week.
okay, once a week.
But you're wanting to do it at night.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's the
People work.
market.
Yeah.
Because people, work. This would be an evening program. And doing it in the spring means the longer we go, the lighter it's going to get outside, which is why Mobile does it, and then they do their last 2 sessions doing a building tour, and then the last one's in the cemetery, and they have a final wrap-up picnic.
Have you thought about going to one of the colleges?
Okay.
I'm sure I can make a phone call to Huntington,
Sure.
see anybody, they've got plenty of space.
I mean, and that might be a good place in the sense that when we get to the portion of doing survey work, we can walk out campus and walk down College Street and actually look at architecture, which was one of the reasons we liked the location of the library is because there is a variety of architecture within a 1-block radius of it. So that, if you know someone who might let us do that we wouldn't be there 8 weeks, but, at least 6 weeks.
Is there a committee for this yet?
No, that's what's on the agenda. We need a working committee if we want to do this.
I'll gladly volunteer to be on that committee.
I won't.
will.
I wouldn't mind being on that committee.
Okay.
First of all, let's decide if we want to do it.
Yeah,
Are we saying we want to do it?
I thought it was a great idea when she first presented it, and I moved that we move forward.
Okay, let's entertain a motion. Chair would now entertain a motion.
I moved that we move forward with the preservation leadership class.
Okay,
Second.
been moving properly second. All those, any unreadiness, first of all? All those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All
I
right.
want to attend.
Now, volunteers.
I'll volunteer for the.
1,
We will,
2,
yeah.
3. We got 3 volunteers.
I mean, really at this point, if we can find a venue, that will tell us how many people we can admit to the class, and start looking at costs for materials. I have done this. We could probably, when I did the realtor course, the first couple of years, we did binders. The next couple, I didn't do binders. I got flash drives with all of this information on it, and they actually say Historic Preservation Commission on them.
That's pretty cool.
And I have some of those left. So we might be able to cut some costs for that.
I mean, I think we've talked about somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 people would be nice.
It would, and if all of you were there, then
That's another 9.
9. That's what I'm saying. And if any of the ARB members want to come, I mean, I
Right.
really see this as an opportunity to be board training as
Mm-hmm.
well.
That
Then
would
I
be
would say
excellent.
that's going to limit the number of
Get them
the public, and maybe limiting that would be a good thing because, oh, if it's full, then it must be good, right?
Yeah. And Brian, I think one of the things we talked about is that if we can find a space for 30 to 40 people and it have AV access, because it's pretty visual.
Yeah.
As I recall, Brian, you mentioned something about the law library being a potential venue some
I
months ago.
mentioned the state bar headquarters, but they're pretty funny about they lock that building up at
Right.
the end of business. So
Right.
if it being, that's why I kept asking the time. They're good to go all day long while they're open, and they have fantastic facilities, anything and I mean, these are lawyers. They've got anything and everything you could possibly need, but it would be during the day. They will lock the door and put you out at 5 o'clock. It may be, and in the summer it's like 4:30. So
Right.
that's a no-go if it's at night. But
Well, now
Huntington is around the clock during school in session. When school's in session, they have night security they have round-the-clock security that will unlock and lock up buildings. My grandfather was the former chief of security at Huntington. I used to run around with him on campus, and anyway, I know the right people to call out there, and they're about to undergo a major rehabilitation project with one of their own buildings.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
So if you check into that and then get back, that'd be great.
If y'all don't mind, I don't know if I have the time to dedicate to 2 committees, and my interests in the historic sign program seem to have diverged from my fellow committee members, and I'd like to step down from that committee and only be on this one. And my involvement
this
with
one.
the sign committee,
Okay.
I'd like to just be as a neighborhood president when y'all reach out to us
okay.
and for this
The
board.
contact.
I think I'd prefer to focus my energy on this group, if that's okay with y'all.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Now, let's do this. Is there anyone who would like to replace him on the sign committee? Anyone who's not,
Well, we've still got one more committee we need warm bodies for, so it may
think they
be that
can
we do
handle
2,
this.
2,
Carol.
and
You and I can handle it.
I think the 2 of them can handle the sign committee fine.
okay. Are you all comfortable with that? 2
I
committees
am.
on the sign committee?
Yes.
2 members on the sign
Well,
committee?
we'll be passing paperwork by you guys
Sure.
anyway, so
Okay.
for your input on criteria and applications.
All right, 2 members on the sign committee, all right. So we have some volunteers for the Preservation Leadership Committee, okay? All right, so you all gonna work and bring us a report at our next meeting for the Preservation Leadership class. Is that right? Okay, very good. 2018 awards. Need Awards Committee to evaluate and refine application process.
And this is on here because Carol headed that up the last 2 years, and Carol doesn't want to do it again. She would like to give someone else the opportunity to do that. And maybe y'all are happy with the application and we just run with it. And I've started compiling a list of projects that I think will probably be complete by the end of this year, that we can actually send out solicitations and hopefully work on getting a better response to it.
Right, so we've got a lot of the paperwork done. Basically, what you need to do is we just change the dates and,
Decide if the
revise.
categories are sufficient.
Right. Look at the categories, see what's out there. And then everyone, it's actually open for nominations, so, it's not up to you to come up with the nominations, it's up to,
It is,
Create
but like I
interest.
said, I've got a list that I've started that we will send them to.
I think this will be a good year. There's a lot wrapping up out there right now that'll be ready to go by the end of the year. So I think we have a lot of impressive awards next year.
Okay. Volunteers.
I wouldn't mind helping. I don't want to lead it up yet because I haven't been here a year yet.
Let me ask this question. Is there anyone who's not on any committee who would like to step up? Is there anyone who's not, okay, you'd like to get on this? Okay, one.
Those are two separate questions, Dr. Bailey. Anyone not on a committee who would like to step up? Those are two separate
Yeah.
questions.
I'm torn between.
You already done a template for the awards anyway, so basically it's just whatever we take to just need to do to just kind of put it together in terms of time and whatever else we need to do with respect to the applications for the awards and but the groundwork is pretty much already
That's right.
there. So
You can review and change.
yeah, so I help
Edit.
out. I'm
Okay.
not gonna lead it, but
All right.
I just spread too thin.
Okay. Very good. And
I'm torn between the sign committee and the awards committee. I have some,
well, one way of compromise is just to do both.
We'll just put your name on both. So you just come when you can.
To do both. We work together. That's one thing I like about this body. We laugh together and we worry together, and you can't beat that. So let us continue to do that, and you'll be surprised what kind of results we get when we maintain that kind of spirit. So is there anyone else who would like to work with this awards committee who can just chip in and be
I
a
will
sounding
help.
board? Thank you
Yeah,
very
I will
much.
help.
That's what we're talking about. Just be a sounding board. We're going to help each other out. Nobody, absolutely nobody should feel that he or she has to do something alone.
Right. It's overwhelming.
That's what we're talking about. Nobody. That's not the way we operate. So let's continue to do things with a smile and go from there.
Dr. Bailey, I'm going to put you on all the committees.
Well, I'm
As
supposed to be
chair.
the ex officio chairman of all of them anyway.
Well, I was going to say, he does a good job on the awards.
Right. Right.
And I think the program's something that we'll need to look at
Surely.
after
Closer.
Are we
last
getting a
year's.
new member?
No.
Okay, I saw somebody had been appointed or reappointed.
To the
something.
Architectural Review Board, Mrs. Bush was just
Ms. Bush,
reappointed.
Okay,
She's on this end.
She's on both.
Oh, I had another thought and it's gone. Oh, well, we'd already volunteered Dr. Bailey to do the history of Montgomery for the class, right?
Oh, he's on class number 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Are the Bushes still on the committee now? Both of them? She didn't say
So, Mr. Long, do you want to be on the awards committee, or? And I'm only asking because what I'll do is I'm going to pull together what we did last year and get it to whoever's on the committee to look at. So,
I'd like to learn more about the process, yes, so
Okay.
I'll be on that.
okay.
I think do you have all my files?
I
I'll send
should have.
Probably do.
I've got a folder, a digital folder of, I think, the program and the application, and I don't remember what else. I should. If I don't, I know where to find you.
they're shutting down the climate control.
Yes. Okay, anything else? Anything else? Anyone has any upcoming event you want to talk about right quickly?
Well, I was going to say, I think last time we discussed renewing the Preservation of the Month Awards. So that's just,
Sure.
for everybody to have in the front of their head if they see a
Right.
project they think would be, ready for that.
Sure, bring it to our attention.
I think the outside of the Bell Building is looking pretty good these
Yes,
days.
it is. Yes, it is.
Is there any reason it needs to be the month? Could it be the quarter? Would it-
Because our sign says
Because the-
restoration of the month.
The big
Is that-
fancy sign.
I saw
But
that
it's
big
also a
s-
sign with triangle on it, and I'm not sure where it is right now, so.
I saw it that said reservation over here on one of these cross streets, and I wondered, if they've got a sign that says Restoration of the Month, how long have they had it there? Because I've
It
never
can stay
even
up for 3 months. It doesn't say how many months.
heard it. It's on one of those cross streets over near the RSA Tower or something.
Oh.
On the way to that car wash, I guess, somewhere over there.
Oh, you know, I think it's on
It's a pretty sign, and the building's for sale.
It's,
Oh,
yeah, it's
yeah.
that townhouse,
Yeah.
that antebellum townhouse.
Yeah.
It's still over there? Okay,
No.
okay.
It
It's
was
never
there
been
2 or 3
there.
days ago.
John Motron's house, that's for sale over there on McDonough.
Okay, anything else? Let me just remind you that we have a tribute to Mary Ann Neely on October 23rd at First Baptist Church beginning at 6 p.m. And I would like to invite at least 2 or 3 of you to serve as ushers on that afternoon. You just talk to me when we close out this afternoon. And what you do is pass out programs and ensure that the guests get the opportunity to sign the book that we will donate to the Alabama Department of Archives and History. Just 2 or 3 of you will be just fine. But I'd like to invite everyone to attend. Anything else?
Is that a Wednesday?
That's a Tuesday.
It's a
2
Tuesday.
weeks,
Oh, okay.
2 weeks from today.
I would like to note that the city council at its meeting last week did move forward and rename College Street Park Mary Ann Neely Park.
Yes.
And we in Old Cloverdale were very excited about that move, and just wanted to put that into the record here tonight.
Sure, very appropriate, and very timely too, yes.
And
Anything-
I know that it will not be the last action the city and the community takes, but it was a good place to start.
Sure. Anything else? Nothing else coming forward? This meeting's hereby adjourned. Thank you very much for coming out.